Yeah, hi. Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. So, it's really very hard to discuss something where you need to pay after you had lunch, right? And I'm not asking for any payments here, but we're discussing something called the rise of the paywall. Uh, I would want to start on a controversial note, and I'm really sorry, my panelists. You know, people say that it's hard to get Indians pay for content online, right? But actually, we are the ones who are paying for a Netflix subscription. We are the ones who are paying for maybe a New York Times subscription, and so on and so forth, right? And we are paying for content, we're consuming content by paying it on digital platforms. To start with, right, is it true that we as publishers are failing somewhere to provide that right set of content that deserves to be paid and read? Nalin, sorry.
I think the answer to the point that you made about is it difficult to make Indians pay or so on. I think the answer to that depends a lot on what is the content that you're doing. It is different if you're Netflix, and it's different if you're Prime, and it's different if you're a news entity or a business news entity. So in our case, for example, we have about 860,000 paying subscribers, which is the largest in the country, the top 10 in the world. That journey started in 2018 onwards, roughly around the end of 2018. And we've learned a few lessons along the way. And we actually don't find it that difficult to increase our subscription base because our rate of new subscriptions is fairly high. But I think what is different, coming from a general news background, what is different is that it wouldn't be, if, for example, the networks that I am much more familiar with personally, which is Times of India, or India Today, or NDTV, which is the general news platforms, which is a very niche business markets-oriented platform, the game is very different. Because fundamentally, I think for the reader, I'm not sure the reader finds it that difficult to pay. It's about, do they really, are you worth being paid for? It's as simple as that. And the thing with general news often is that that it's often everybody, in this age of echo chambers, everybody wants their, whether it's left or right or centrist and so on. But the market for pay is very, very small. It might be nice to have, but does it really make a difference to your life if you don't get it? It's the same thing that the broadsheets are facing with that, this whole thing of the summer bump, right? So people go on summer vacation, they stop their newspaper subscription, and then they would renew it when they come back. Increasingly, the big newspapers are finding that people now don't renew when they come back. Because when they don't get the paper in print for 15 days or 20 days and they come back, they find they don't really need it. They didn't really miss it, right? Because it used to have it on the app anyway. So it's the same thing with, so you really have to be worth it. In our case, when I'm saying we don't find it relatively that difficult, is because the content is, we invest a lot in that quality of content. We get a lot of our subscribers are people who are investors in the market, who are looking to be more informed in their buy and sell decisions, and they find value in that service. And it's a combination of data, technical analyses, and news, and stuff that you wouldn't necessarily find out there. But we invest a lot in those resources. If we were to flip the wheel around the general stuff that we do, which I think some of it is great journalism, I'm not sure people would necessarily pay for that part, because it has to be very focused on a niche-based audience.
It's interesting that you draw the analogy with the newspaper, because in my case, I remember that COVID was the last time when I used to subscribe to a newsletter or a newspaper rather in home. Post that, it has all been digital, and I am not yet a subscriber apart from with any of the Indian media news outlets. But Chitranshu, Nalin was speaking about the sweet spot in content, right? You need to find that sweet spot and hit it. You guys seem to have found that sweet spot. What is that, if you can describe it?
I think if I reveal it now, I won't be employable by Newslaundry, so I won't reveal the sweet spot. But I think to add to what Nalin was saying, I think he touched upon it. I think because even though the potential is huge, like you talked about, like number of people paying for OTT and stuff like Netflix, there are around 100 million people who pay for OTT, but the news market is just like a sliver of it. The place where the Indian subscription news market is right now, it's really a game of depth and not of volume. So even if you see publications, whether it's legacy or whether it's digital natives like us, people who publishers who have been successful, they've been successful because they have a differentiator or they have certain depth of content, right? They are specifically solving a specific user need, right? So for example, if you take Moneycontrol, a lot of people who invest in the market will download the Moneycontrol app, keep a track of all the stock, get alerts on it. So that's a very specific user need, right? Whereas because most of the publications in the media ecosystem are still coming out of the ad-based revenue model, everyone is just, okay, let's do more content. It will bring in more ads and it will bring in more ad revenue, right? But the same strategy doesn't really work for subscription, right? So even publications, when they want to focus on subscription, their content strategy in a way is still optimized for ad revenue, right? So if we as a website, we are confident, we know that a user on our website, we are not someone's primary source of news, right? Like no one will come to Newslaundry or News Minute for that matter to check, say, what's the latest IPL score. If we do start doing those kind of pieces, people will actually not pay for it, right? Because we'll never be able to beat, say, Moneycontrol or NDTV for that matter. So as a publication, you really need to be confident about what your differentiator is and what is the kind of user need that you're solving for.
Interesting. Nidhi, in your case, as you dabble into this, paywall journey, what is that differentiator? What is that, part of the content that you want or your readers are really willing to pay for?
Right. I think both Chitranshu and Nalin have touched on it. I think it's now more about specialized content. The content that users and audiences pay for at the Quint is generally stories that people care about. It's the stories that go a lot in depth. We do a lot of follow-ups, which means that, once the news breaks, we might not get on the news cycle immediately. We would wait and we would really come up with an angle that would be unique and also in a format that the Quint is known for. It'll be a format that is completely digital, very away from TV. But we won't stop there. Like, we would cover that story, and if that story warrants, we would, after a few months, after the story has gone off the SEO trends, etc., we would still go back and we would do a lot of follow-ups. I think that's the kind of stories that our audiences pay for. Another beat that another kind of stories that people pay for is that we focus a lot on the specific beats that we have expertise in or that we know we can build expertise in. So that's what our audiences pay for. I think they've mentioned value and they've mentioned, we're not playing the numbers game anymore. It's also about maintaining a channel with your audience through community building or through, direct networking and just listening to them and talking to them to really understand what they want. So we do a lot of webinars with our members. We try and understand, what they think we should cover when it comes to big events like elections. So we try and build that channel so that we know what is that they want from us and what is that they would be willing to pay for. Because at the end of the day, as you mentioned, people are paying for Netflix, people are paying for other OTT, people are also paying for several other subscriptions. So for a general person in India right now, the pool of this is how much money I'll set apart from subscriptions is going to be very limited. So to stand out and say, okay, he'll pay for me, but not, he or she will pay for me, but not for another service, you really have to convince them, and you can only do that by having that channel of communication, I think.
Interesting. Vaibhav, in your case, right? What's that point when subscribers, I mean, readers of NDTV become your subscribers?
Okay, so for us, we are NDTV Profit. We are a business news organization. And for us, the mantra is simple, that we help people make better business decisions. We help people make money. And as everyone on the panel has said, that you need to provide the value. So our value is this, that will give you some valuable insights that will help you make better business decisions. And on the point that you mentioned that are we underperforming as an industry, right now I'll say we are not there where we should be, but I think I'm very bullish in next 3 to 5 years. This is going to be the major revenue source for most of the news organizations. Even when Netflix came to India, they were struggling, right? And they had to spend a lot on branding and a lot to convince users on why they should pay. So basically, currently, Indians are not willing to pay for news at, it's still fairly easy for a niche organization to do that. But for a generic organization, news, it's difficult. But I think it's our responsibility to make sure for them to realize the value and why they should subscribe and what they'll get.
Great. So for, just to sum up this first round, I think, some of us in this panel have found the sweet spot, some are still looking for it. But let's understand the trends better. Chitranshu, you mentioned about, News Minute, right? And, we are aware that, Newslaundry and News Minute have come together and are bundling their packages, right? Is bundling a way to go forward when it comes to increase the subscriber revenue?
I think it's a yes and no answer. See, there are two types of bundling. So for example, either you can bundle with, say, like a games app, like an OTT app, or you bundle with, say, like a news publishers like we've done. My personal opinion is just bundling with, say, like an OTT app, while it might help you in the short run, it does not really help you in the long run because it's not really sustainable. We as a small independent organization might cut a deal with, say, like an OTT app, but someone who has way more money, bigger than us, will probably get a better deal, and the users, because in that kind of a deal, you're not building any brand loyalty or loyalty at the user end. Our partnership at News Minute has a lot to do with the kind of values that we share, right? That both of us are independent newsroom, both of us do a lot of original reportage, right? So, and while we share values, we complement each other as well, right? Because News Minute extensively focuses on South. They have a network of reporters across all the South states. We focus more on media critique. We focus more on North. We have more multimedia programming where there is more text heavy. So just from a product standpoint also, our strengths complement each other, right? And obviously there was an overlap of readers and subscribers between both the platforms. And because see, we started subscription 10 years back, right? Back then I still remember the payment failure rate used to be like 80-90%. There was no UPI, there was no payment gateway as well. Back then, we had no competition, right? It's just that nobody else would ask for money. We had a very strong value proposition that we are independent, we are ad-free, you pay for our content if you like this kind of coverage. 10 years down the line, the situation is very different, right? Every publisher, worth their salt, is asking for money, whether it's a small independent newsroom or whether it's a big publication. And even as it might be the potential might be huge, the number of people who want to pay for news is still very limited, right? So eventually a reader has to make a choice, right? That either I will give money to only a certain organization, or for example, I know there are a lot of users who take turns to support multiple independent media organizations, right? That one month I'll give money to them and the other month to a different organization, right? So that way we were very confident that if we were to continue the kind of subscription growth we have had previously, it is very important to offer a product that is comprehensive, that is not just covering North, but is also covering South. And more importantly, in terms of programming as well, right? Because like I said, we complement each other's programming as well. And because we share values, right? So for example, during the elections, we raised around 70 lakhs within like a span of 2 months. So I think because there is a shared value, readers also recognize that why there is a need for these two organizations to come together, right? There is a business need as well. It is within the context of what's happening in the larger legacy media ecosystem. And I think that's why it's been successful. In our case, the good thing about us has been that we've always been a subscription publication, right? It's not like we started doing subscription because pandemic happened or because all of a sudden Google and Amazon were running away with ad revenue. So we were always doing, say, like 6 to 8 pieces, deep dive content that we felt confident that this is something that people would want to pay for. So from a programming or from a content standpoint, we didn't have to make that transformation, right? That earlier we were doing everything. Now let's figure out what are the kind of 2 pieces we have to do every day to sort of optimize for subscription. News Minute, on the other hand, we had to go from that journey, right? Because they did have ads on their website, on their video platform. Because they were largely ad funded, they were also focusing a lot of, again, the volume publishing game, right? Where you just publish from an ad revenue standpoint. But that original reportage, that original content viewpoint was always there, and they also had that connect, right? Because what's good with both Newslaundry and News Minute, they have a very strong brand identity, right? News Minute was started by Dhanya after she worked for close to 2 decades across legacy media organization, and because she had a conviction that if everyone's reporting from Delhi or Bombay, who's going to tell the stories from South, right? And similarly with Newslaundry. So it held that we had a very strong brand proposition. And one thing about money or bundle subscription or about any revenue is, in India, nobody will give you money unless you ask for it, right? So for example, if you're listening to Spotify, there is an ad every 3rd or 4th minute if you're not paying for it, right? Especially in a market like India. So for example, early on, we had to do a lot of advocacy, right? Why is it that you have to pay for news, right? Why is it that's important for readers like you and I to step up? I think that kind of advocacy is very important because eventually we are cashing in on that, right? Because again, we are not a legacy publication where our subscription is 100 rupees. Like our annual subscription is 5,000 and 12,000 rupees, which is probably one of the most expensive subscription in the market, right? So I can game the subscription in a way where I underprice it and then try to find like hundreds of users, but I know that will not be successful. So I think it's like a mix of value proposition and shared values if you are doing like a bundle subscription.
That's interesting. Staying on the bundling part, Nalin, people come to Moneycontrol for specific kind of content, and that's why they are paying it for, right? Do you think bundling Moneycontrol subscription with an OTT or maybe a Zomato Gold or so and so forth, will it really work?
So I'll reserve my answer on the OTT point, but in terms of bundling in general, bundling is something we have not done so far, right? So, so for example, Mint does that with the Wall Street Journal and all of that. Now, so the idea being that you take one subscription for a lower price, you get another one which is maybe a more sought after one. The Business Standard also does that, right? So that's by the way, we have a tie-up with FT where our subscribers get access to some FT content, but it's not a bundled package for subscription, right? They're 2 different things. What we find is that so far we have found great value in people. We find it's more sustainable so far if people buy you for what you are, because they're really valuing you and not necessarily what some add-on benefit that you get. So by the way, this add-on benefit business has been tried by the Times Group a lot with Times Prime, for example, and it didn't really work. Now, again, there could be specific reasons why it didn't work, but that's separate. I mean, in general, different organizations have different points of view, and some work and some don't. But in our case, we haven't tried it for this reason. The other point I want to make is, which kind of picks up from what Chitranshu and Nidhi was saying earlier. See, in terms of ultimately the reader who's paying for you is paying for us not just for the content, but a certain value system that you stand for. Because if you look at, say, if you look at, say, independent media or, say, The Wire, say, look at Newslaundry, if you look at, say, the News Minute. My understanding of this in a previous Hafta, we did a study around this, and we found that for people who subscribe for these platforms, the pool is very common. say if there are 100 people who are subscribing to one of these, they're likely to subscribe to the other one too. It's not like there are 400 different people who are subscribing differently to this. It's because they come from a certain value system and they value what these platforms have to offer from that, right? That may be true of right-wing platforms as well to some extent. The point I'm trying to make is that and therefore, your content has to really stand for example, we also have a very large advertising audience. Advertising is a big part of our revenue model as well. So we also have a large amount of content which is outside the paywall. But how we produce that content is entirely different from how we produce the content which is behind the paywall. If you were to start just thinking that everything that we are producing people pay for, absolutely not. Our teams are different. The way we use is different. If I'll give you an example, we had a very senior journalist who was writing for outside the paywall, and we asked him to write for behind the paywall soon. And in 2 days, he said, look, I'm not sure I can do this. Because my way of understanding the world is different. I'm a journalist, I write for a general audience. I'm not used to writing for a very specialized audience because then you really have to go much more deeper. Right? And it's also a mindset thing. Because you're looking for different things in that. And like I think what Nidhi said, what you do on the advertising side, when in the large volumes, on digital traffic growing, is fundamentally a function of speed and volume, along with any special content that you may have. That doesn't work behind the paywall at all, because you really have to have something special. Now, whether it's coming from a certain value system, whether it's something that others, a piece of content others don't have, or a perspective that others don't have, but it has to resonate with a wide enough group of people.
That's an interesting point. Since the morning, a lot has been spoken about, about the balance between ad revenue and subscription revenue, and how publishers are basically trying to create a separate revenue stream. Vaibhav, I want to come to you and basically talk about how NDTV Profit as an entity is balancing it. I mean, we heard Nalin talk about how journalists are creating specialized content, right? What's your take?
So I think it is very important to balance both of these, and the only way to do that is data, is understanding what your audiences are doing, what are they reading, and what are their user behavior on the site. So for me, what we try to do is we try to understand the content that the content value which certain people will pay for, and there are certain content which people will not pay for. So we try to keep the content free, which is not that valuable, and the content which is very insightful and making some difference is premium. We try to keep it behind the paywall. So data is the key here.
Sure. No. So I was just intrigued to ask you. Don't you feel that content which is more rich and is more analytical and gives out more would get more people to read if it's out of the paywall?
So what's happening is, for all the news publishers, 80% of the audience are only one and done. They only come to you once. So the idea here is to create loyalty and to build a habit. So I, as a news publisher, when I know that I need to balance both of the things, and I would not like to give my premium content just for free, right? And the idea here is to acquire audiences on the site and then show them the premium content and give them the value, and use features, strategies like registration wall, or you give them a free trial and get them hooked. The idea is this.
Nalin, is it really a game between analysis and information?
I think there's analysis, and there's analysis of different kinds, right? I mean, if you just have lots of opinion, that doesn't take you that very far, because everybody has an opinion. So I'm not sure that alone will give you. It depends. See, if you're a left-wing platform and people will pay for that, or a right-wing platform, people will pay for that. But in our case, for example, just having opinion pieces around it doesn't work at all. Nobody's paying us for opinion on the stock markets. People are paying us for what they see as perceived value in their investment decisions. So for example, we have a large team of SEBI certified analysts who specifically work on stock picks, right? So that's a very different skill from what journalists normally would have. That's business journalists who can't do that, or the average business journalist can't do that. So that's why I'm saying it's different horses for courses. There are certain journalists who can make that switch for very specialized content, because the teams that, our MC Pro team, for example, is run by some top-class journalists who've been in newsroom for 25, 30 years. But they lead that because they have the sensibility for the audience and what audience they're looking for. But a very large number of people who work for them are not journalists, right? So that's the point I'm trying to make. Indeed. The other point I want to make is that most newsrooms, or at least in the mainstream newsrooms, most newsrooms are simply not geared for adapting to a paid audience, even though everybody wants a paid audience. Because their entire newsroom workflow is built for the general audience. It's built for content that nobody's going to pay for. And that's a problem.
Indeed. Nidhi, I want to talk to you on yet another trend, which is about micropayments. Pay as you read. Is this a model that will really, build the future for this business?
So it's a model that some publications, internationally have adopted. We've tried it like very early on in our, when we were figuring out our membership. At this stage, I think at least for the Quint, it's not something that I see working, because we are not playing the volume game. I think micropayments are a lot about how much you're publishing, and hence more people are seeing it and paying. Also, at least as independent, smaller newsrooms working on specialized content, we don't want people to pay for just that one piece of story, right? We want them to actually subscribe to us to support the kind of journalism that we're doing overall. We don't just want them to pay for that one thing and then go away. It also doesn't really sit well with us when it comes to our community building, because as Vaibhav was talking about, a lot of people just come once to the website and then they go away and never come back. I think, a micropayment model works kind of for that audience and doesn't really help us build any community or loyalty. So for us, it doesn't work, but I've seen it work in other publications whose audience is very different. Their goals are very different. So yeah.
We started this experiment with paper article in 2018, where what we were doing is when we started very early, and in India it was very difficult to convince people to pay. So what we did, we launched first article at 1 rupee and then at 18 rupees. So what it helped us is basically get people habit to pay something, and we got some very interesting data in the newsroom. Because what we thought, okay, these articles will convert to paywall, they were very different. So basically, we were able to use this to build our strategy. So my thoughts on paper article is, if a news organization is in a stage where they don't know what to do and they just want to launch the subscription, then this model is really good. But if you are at an advanced stage, then this is not a great model, because it will eat into your loyal audiences and people will not buy your full subscription and will only buy 2 or 3 articles.
Interesting. I know, we can go on and on, but we have a timer ticking by. But as we come to the close of this discussion, I really want to come to all of you, right, and do a rapid fire round. One factor, and you are only allowed to say one factor that you really think will, grow this industry, and take it beyond, the level that we are currently at.
Quality. Sorry? Quality.
Quality.
Like I said, the depth of content.
It's still close. Yeah.
I think it'll be building personality, something that individual creators have cracked, and it does come a little bit from TV, but then building personalities for digital, for in-depth content. I think that would, taking a page out of content creators, and that would really help publishers and really help scale subscriptions.
Great. Vaibhav?
Yeah, I think for me, it would be brand building. Currently, what I'm seeing is that people are spending a lot on acquiring audiences and a lot of performance marketing, but people are not spending much on brand building, on why they should pay, and even kind of telling people, okay, that we have a paywall. So yeah.
It's interesting. See, we asked all of them. All of them kind of, touched upon the quality of content, content taking a personality, building our brand around content. So it's actually the content that matters, right? The panel is about paywall, and nobody actually talked about the ticket size. So you get it, right? So it's actually content that really differentiates. And I think next year when we meet and when we do this panel, I think we'll have more trends to discuss upon. On that note, I would like to close this panel. Thank you so much, panelists. Thank you, audience. You have been great. Thanks.